All right, it's 2 o'clock and we'll begin today. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on the basics of head protection in the construction industry. This is the first of a two-part series. I'm Brad Sant, the Senior Vice President of Safety and Education with the American Road and Transportation Builders Association. And as noted, this is the first in a two-part series being presented by NIOSH's-NORA Construction Sector Council's Struck By Work Group. I have the pleasure of co-chairing that work group with Alana Klein, who you'll hear from in a couple of weeks as she'll moderate the second session. I'm happy to be here today alongside CPWR's Jessica Bunting, who's available for support in the chat section. All right, now I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Our first is Srinivas Konda, an epidemiologist in the Division of Safety Research at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, our sponsor today. He will begin by sharing some data and trends related to traumatic brain injuries in the workplace. Srinivas received his Master of Public Health degree from the University of Southern Mississippi in 2008, with a concentration in epidemiology and biostatistics. His research interests include workplace violence, traumatic brain injuries, and motor vehicle injuries. He'll be followed by our good friend Diana Jones, the Senior Director of Technical Programs and Development with the International Safety Equipment Association, or ISEA. She will follow up with an overview of the current ISEA and ANSI, American National Standards Institute, Z89.1 standard, and anticipated changes to reflect new advances in head protection. Following Diana, Rosa Greenberg, a research analyst with a Research to Practice program at CPWR, that's the Center for Construction Research and Training, will then share information on how to select proper head protection based on risk and other considerations. Rosa has been the lead facilitator for an expert evaluation panel on head protection set up by CPWR to better define various headgear options available today and to provide guidance on best practices for selecting headgear in construction. The issue of head protection crosses over industries and occupations, so we'll also be hearing from Brady Robinette today. I got to meet Brady as we are working together on an ASTM program. Brady is lieutenant with the Lubbock Fire and Rescue Department and has been extremely involved in the creation of the ASTM standard for protective helmets worn by pedestrian roadway workers. Brady will discuss the specifics of that standard and what we can learn from it. Finally, Dr. Douglas Trout with the NIOSH Office of Construction, Safety, and Health will lead us through about 30 minutes of Q&A, so get your questions queued up. So thank you all for being with us here today, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Srinivas Konda for some research that he will share with us. Take it away, Srinivas.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for the introduction. So thank you for inviting me to present on this important topic of TBIs in construction. So here's a brief agenda. I'll define what traumatic brain injury or TBI is and present high-level fatal and non-fatal data in construction along with their associated cost, and end the presentation with some key takeaways. So what is a TBI? It's a brain damage caused by an external force or impact. This can occur from a bump, blow, or a jolt, or a penetrating injury during motor vehicle crashes, falls, or when hit by a falling object, which disrupts normal function of the brain. TBI severity ranges from mild, moderate, and to severe TBIs. They result in physical and cognitive impairment. So coming to fatal TBIs in construction, work-related fatal TBIs were obtained from the Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries, are called CFOI. Since this system doesn't have a specific TBI case identification method, we used nature of injury for intracranial injuries. From 2011 to 2022, over 2,400 construction workers died from TBIs in the United States, averaging just over 200 deaths per year, with a fatality rate of 2 per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers. So to understand the impact of TBS on construction industry and compare them across industry, we calculated percentages. So these fatal TBS in construction account for 21% of total construction fatalities for this study period, and 27% of total work-related fatal TBS across all industries. So this slide shows the annual rates of construction worker deaths from TBIs from 2011 through 2022. The fatal TBI rate started at 1.7 per 100,000 FTEs and peaked at 2.4 in 2014 and leveled it off at 1.7 per 100,000 workers in 2022. So coming to non-fatal TBS in construction, data on estimated construction workers treated for non-fatal TBIs in emergency departments were obtained from the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System called NICE-WORK. Since NICE-WORK also doesn't have a specific TBI identification method, we used diagnosis and injured body part, that is head. For these diagnoses, we used concussion, fracture, or internal organ injury to the head. From 2015 to 2021, an estimated 75,600 construction workers were treated for non-fatal TBS in emergency departments in the United States, averaging 11,000 per year at a rate of 10 per 10,000 full-time equivalent workers. These TBIs in construction represented 4% of all non-fatal construction injuries and illnesses, and 9% of all non-fatal TBIs across all industries. So from 2015 to 2021, non-fatal TBI rate decreased by 6% from 11.3 in 2015 to 10.6 per 10,000 FTE. However, because of high standard errors and fluctuations in rates, it is unclear if this reflects a true decline. So these results should be interpreted with some caution. So male construction workers had the highest non-fatal TBI rate compared to female construction workers. Among all age groups, young workers, those are 16 to 19 years old, experienced the highest non-fatal TBI rate at 23.1 per 10,000 FTE, while those aged 55 and above had the lowest rate at 8. However, this difference between demographic groups is not statistically significant and should be interpreted with some caution. One notable observation is that, as you see, non-fatal TBI rates tend to decrease with increasing age. So 90% of non-fatal TBIs were caused by contact with objects and equipment and falls and slips and trips. Majority of them are from contact with objects and equipment, which account for almost 50% of non-fatal TBIs. So we compared the outcome for construction workers with TBIs who were treated and released versus admitted to the hospital. So in construction, 17% of TBI patients were hospitalized compared to only 7% in all other industries. So looking at some overall financial impact of traumatic brain injuries in work-related traumatic brain injuries. So according to the National Council on Compensation Insurance, the average cost for a work-related TBI claim is more than twice that of any injury claim requiring time off. This, as you see, average total cost per TBI claim is $136,000 for all industries. For average lost time cost per any injury claim is only $51,000. So in another study on analyzing mega claims are those over $3 million, found that in head and brain injuries, 74% of mega claims were exceeded $3 million. Majority are more than $10 million. So most mega claims over 10 million came from the construction industry due to severe head and brain injuries, which include traumatic brain injuries. So in summary, a considerable number of construction workers died from TBIs, representing a notable portion of total fatalities in the sector. Construction workers face a higher risk of severe injuries from TBI compared to workers in other industries. As you see, the high percentage of hospitalization in construction. This can lead to substantial financial burden due to various costs, including for disability, rehabilitation, other support services. So there are limitations in this TBI data. First is a lack of ICD-9 diagnosis codes in these two systems might have led to some underreporting or misclassification of TBIs. For example, NICE only captures non-fatal injuries treated in emergency department. It excludes cases those are managed in elsewhere, such as physician office, urgent care, or those receive no treatment at all. As you see in the injury pyramid, we have annual fatal TBIs, non-fatal TBIs, but we don't know what TBIs we are missing. So despite these limitations, many construction workers at serious risk for TBIs. Wearing helmets along with other protective gear is essential for reducing TBI risk to improve safety on the construction sites. You will hear more about helmet safety and then standards in the next part of the webinar. Thank you for your time. I will hand it over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. So I'm Diana Jones with the International Safety Equipment Association, and today I'm going to go over the ANSI/ICA Z89 standard, kind of go over some of the misconceptions that are out there, what we know about the standard, what's in the standard, the different types and classes, and then what we're doing to address some of those misconceptions, and then I'll briefly touch on what we're working towards in the next revision of the standard. But first, I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of ISCA. And if some people don't know that ISCA is the secretariat for the ANSI ISCA Z89.1 standard. So we are a nonprofit trade association based in Arlington, Virginia. And our primary mission is to ensure that workers are equipped with the highest quality safety equipment through the development of standards and advocacy. We're responsible for developing and publishing the ANSI ISCA standards, and these standards set the guidelines for safety equipment across a wide variety of industries, including construction, manufacturing, and healthcare. In addition to standards development, we work closely with the US Congress and regulatory agencies such as OSHA to ensure policies that promote safety and worker protection is a top priority. And then ISCA also provides educational resources and opportunities for industry collaboration. Whoops, sorry about that. Next up. So as you know, head protection is evolving, right? It's going under significant amount of transformation. And We're seeing advancements in materials being integrated into head protection, making head protection lighter and providing better impact resistance and comfort. There are also innovations in integrated features. For example, helmets now often come with built-in technology, such as RFIDs, that provide real-time data and information to identify workers in the event of an accident. And the focus on proper fit and comfort cannot be overstated. Enhanced ergonomic and ventilation designs are making head protection more wearable for longer periods, reducing the likelihood of workers opting out of wearing them. So with all of these innovations and advancements comes confusion. And it's also important to understand the common misconceptions that can lead to unsafe practices. In a recent survey we did, with J.J. Keller, it shows that there's a significant gap between perceived and actual safety, with many workers overestimating the protection their helmets actually provide. The survey revealed a significant gap between perceived and actual understanding of hard hat versus safety helmet terminology. A majority of respondents believed that only the helmet style protection offers full impact coverage, whereas in reality, head protection cannot be judged based on just how it looks. Both hard hats and safety helmets are styles of head protection, and they both can offer comprehensive protection when meeting the Type 2 standards. Additionally, there's a misunderstanding between hard hats and safety helmets when it comes to features and the protection they offer. The perception in the field is that safety helmets offer more safety features than hard hats, and that only helmet-style head protection offers impact protection on all sides, top, sides, front, and back. But in fact, both can be equipped with modern safety features like chin straps and additional safety features when they are designed to meet the Type 2 of the ANSI standard. There's also significant confusion with the standards that are out there. In our survey, a significant portion of respondents believed that the EN 12492 standard offers more protection than the ANSI ISCA Z89.1, and more than half are unsure, reflecting a misunderstanding of the scope and applicability of these standards. The ANSI ISCA standard specifies the performance criteria that head protection must meet, including impact resistance, penetration, electrical insulation, and resistance to flame and heat. And the OSHA regulations require that head protection comply with this standard. ANSI/IACA Z89.1 is the standard for the United States. EN 12492 is a European standard that specifies safety requirements for safety helmets for use in mountaineering. A question we get a lot is this required by OSHA? And the answer that we give is that no, the EN 12492 standard is not applicable in the United States. So here I'm going to go over some of the, address some of the misconceptions with the different types. And the first type that I'm going to go over is Type 1. Now this is what is currently in the ANSI ISCA standard. Type 1 head protection are designed to provide impact protection from blows to the top of the head, as well as protection from lateral impacts and penetration from objects that may fall from above. Type 2 head protection provides the same level of protection as Type 1, but also provides additional protection against lateral impacts from the front, sides, and rear. With a Type 2 head protector, there is also an option for a chin strap, which is currently in the standard. And then moving on to the EN standard that I want to touch on briefly. This is a requirement for the mountaineering, as I mentioned before, and testing requirements provide a slightly larger top impact, as you can see on the test zone area for mountaineering and climbing helmets. While the EN standard provides additional top impact protection when it's compared to the ANSI Type 1. The standard is not equivalent to ANSI Type 2, as it does not provide the same lateral protection that a Type 2 helmet provides. So understanding these distinctions is vital for proper equipment selection and use. So there are many resources out there helping to address these misconceptions, which you will hear more about and learn more about today. One of the things ISEA has created is a website to help understand what types of head protection is available, to better understand what's in the various standards and what resources are available and what modern features are out there. So we've created this landing page with a brief quiz on it so that you can go and check out and see if your thoughts are correct or not. Additionally, the number one thing you can do is read the label on your head protector or when you're selecting a head protector. The label on head protection is a requirement by the standard, and it identifies the type and class of protection for the product. Because as I said before, we can't judge head protection by its shell, but the accurate information is identified on the label. So here, the ISEA Z89.1 committee is currently working on the next revision of the standard, which is expected to be released in 2025. Now, since the standard is not final, what I'm going to be talking about here today are pending updates. And I just wanted to let you know that they are not approved. They're not going to be final until approved by ANSI. So what the committee is currently working on is introducing enhanced testing protocols for head protection that meets the additional will meet additional protection, and it will be identified with a plus marking. The standard will still maintain the Type 1 and Type 2 and the classes E, C, and G as it is now, and provide protection from falls in addition to protection from dropped objects and side protection and electrical protection. And just briefly, Class E, Class C, and Class G are the different levels of electrical protection. The added protection that will be included for Type 1 is additional shock and penetration testing, along with a mandatory chin strap and retention system effectiveness. This roll-off testing focuses on ensuring that helmets stay securely fastened to the wearer during an impact. For Type 2, the chin strap will also be mandatory and required to meet the new retention system effectiveness, aka the roll-off testing criteria. Now remember, these are pending updates and are likely to be in the next edition of the ANSI ISEA Z89.1 standard, but we wanted to make you aware of what is coming. And I think with Rosa next, she's going to get into choosing the right type of protection. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Hi, everybody. My name is Rosa Greenberg, and I am a research analyst in CPWR's Research to Practice program. I am going to be discussing CPWR's new resource for selecting head protection for construction work. So today I will first give a brief overview of CPWR's expert evaluation panel on head protection. Then I will outline our new head protection resource and highlight a couple of key components in the resource, limitations of the existing standards, and primary factors to consider when selecting head protection. So last year, CPWR began to convene experts from academia and labor, government, manufacturing, and others to create an expert evaluation panel on this topic. In establishing this panel, we had two main goals, and our first goal was to assess industry awareness and adoption of ANSI ISEA Z89.1 Type 2 protective headgear with and without chin straps over time. And our second goal was to establish and disseminate recommendations for use of protective headgear. Our panel has 25 members, and it is structured using an interactive process that is based loosely on the Delphi method. The Delphi method is a systematic process to achieve a reliable consensus among a panel of experts. And in our panel process, we create questionnaires for our experts, we share the results of their input, and we host meetings in which we discuss responses and work to establish consensus to work to meet our goals. And in these meetings, our panel identified informational resource creation as a key priority. And so we have developed and published the first resource, which I will now discuss. And thanks so much to our experts for participating in this panel and for all of their work on this resource. So the panel's first product is titled Selecting Head Protection for Construction Work. And it seeks to provide an overview of key issues in head protection to help inform stakeholders about how to make the best decisions about head protection for their needs. And the document was first published in March of 2024, and we subsequently updated it and actually have already published a second version that we released in September. It was available in English all year and is recently now available in Spanish. The link was just posted today for our Spanish version, so that is newly available. The first half of the resource is focused on content like what Diana Jones from ISEA just shared, defining terms like hard hats versus safety helmets, providing information about the difference between ANSI ISEA Z89.1 Type 1 and Type 2 head protection, and explaining key elements of the current standard. We also include supplemental information about where OSHA fits into this landscape, the European EN 12492 standard, and more. And we also discuss limitations in the current standard and provide a set of primary factors that we recommend considering in deciding how to select head protection. So while the ANSI ISEA Z89.1 standard is enormously important, there are a set of limitations that I want to highlight in the current standard. And the standard itself outlines some limitations. First, protective headgear that passes testing standards should, as is quoted in the standard, never be viewed as a substitute for good safety practices and engineering controls, end quote. And similarly, as the standard also states, quote, protective helmets reduce the amount of force from an impact blow, but cannot provide complete head protection from severe impact and penetration. Helmets that meet this standard provide limited protection, but should be effective against small tools, small pieces of wood, bolts, nuts, rivets, sparks, and similar hazards. So in addition to the limitations that are named in the standard itself, I want to also briefly highlight some additional limitations related to the lack of third-party testing and certification. Although ANSI ISEA Z89.1 provides thorough descriptions of testing procedures, there's no oversight and no third-party certification requirements like those that are found in government regulations. Testing is often performed by the manufacturers themselves or a third party that is selected by the manufacturer. And there's also some flexibility in how testers perform and administer testing for specific components of the standard. Although there is no third-party testing or certification required for Type 1 or Type 2 designations, you can talk to your manufacturer about their testing methods and their results. You can ask who conducted the testing and how the head protection performed. And you can also request a certificate of compliance and or a declaration of conformity from the manufacturer, and that attests that the protective headgear has been produced in conformance with the applicable specifications, and it outlines the standards and the level of protection that it meets. Next, I am going to discuss some of the primary factors to consider in making your head protection selection. So it's important to highlight that the first step in deciding on protective headgear should always be conducting a job hazard analysis or a JHA, a job safety analysis or JSA or a risk assessment. And this is because the level and the type of protection needed, along with stylistic choices and accessories, is influenced by the tasks being done and the work environment. At CPWR, we consider planning to be one of the most important strategies for preventing injury and illness, and we have many resources to support planning. CPWR's pre-task planning guidelines and resources linked on this slide, and the link to the slides is available in the chat, can support you in performing hazard and risk analysis before the work begins. And in regard to selecting head protection itself, here are some of the factors that we discuss in our resource. So the first 5 relate to the worksite environment. Work at heights, slips, trips, and falls at the same level, struck by hazards, weather and temperature, and visibility needs. Consider purchasing type 2 protective headgear with a chin strap when performing work at heights or work on the same level to protect you in the case of a slip, trip, or a fall. Chin straps secure protective headgear to your head and help prevent it from slipping off of your head, and type 2 protective headgear will provide better protection to the front, back, and sides of your head compared to type 1. In addition, it's also important to consider struck by hazards when selecting protective headgear, because part of the reason for wearing headgear is to protect workers from falling and flying objects. And in addition, weather and temperature are also relevant factors, both for hot and cold working conditions. And finally, visibility needs are also a work environment factor. Depending on the time and the location of work, for example, road work, it may be helpful to have high visibility headgear. Moving down the list, the next factors relate to equipment needs, use of accessories, and electrical hazards. Use of accessories may affect your head protection choice. Construction safety helmets are still relatively new to the market, so there may be fewer accessory options available, like welding hoods, compared to those that are available for hard hats, which have been around for longer. Talk to your manufacturer, as there are constantly new devices and accessories hitting the market. And next, electrical hazards may also affect your decision-making about protective headgear. The ANSI ISEA Z89.1 standard provides hazard-specific categories for headgear, Class C, E, and G, and Class G and Class E headgear must meet performance requirements for electrical classifications. Finally, the last 2 factors that we discuss relate to individual preference, and the first is fit and comfort. The overall look and fit of construction safety helmets are different from hard hats. And in addition, while they offer additional protection compared to ANSI ISEA Z89.1 type 1 headgear, type 2 protective headgear tends to be heavier due to the additional padding. And the last is cost. Safety helmets are currently more expensive than hard hats, but also typically have a longer service life. And more detail on all of these factors and what to consider related to them can be found in our resource. So thank you so much for the time. And again, more information on each of these topics is available in our resource.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Brady Robinette. I'm a firefighter with Lubbock Fire Rescue up in the way northern panhandle of Texas. And I want to talk about this new standard that recently got published that I'm so excited about. It took over 2 years of effort. Over 50 plus individuals were involved from all different disciplines, and really excited about it. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. But the ASTM is a global standards body that maintains over 12,000 standards globally. And so it's a really big organization if you haven't heard of them. This standard is called the Specification for Protective Helmets Worn by Pedestrian Roadway Workers. Today, I may just call it a roadway helmet, or the ASTM roadway helmet for simplicity. Yeah. And on the next slide, I want to talk about what got me involved in this subject. And it was unfortunately a story of tragedy. On January 11th of 2020, Lubbock Fire Rescue and Lubbock Police Department were on scene at a car wreck. And so they're on the northbound interstate lanes there where you see engine 2 and engine 4 in that diagram. They were making sure everything was okay in the center median where that initial wreck was. Everything was. There's no injuries. The ambulance ended up leaving the scene at that point, but a third wreck happened ahead. There was actually two originally in that median, and so a third wreck happened ahead as they were on scene. There was spotty icing that day. It was the only thing a little bit out of the ordinary, and so crews from engine 2 were walking ahead to check on that vehicle when a vehicle from the opposing lane, so coming southbound the opposite direction, lost control and crossed the median, and that's where they caused that horrible scene of destruction. But that vehicle crossed that median there. It crossed the northbound lanes of the interstate. It went down a steep embankment, crossed the access road, and ended up over there in a field. But the responders it affected was not pictured there on the right. And the bottom left of that picture is Lubbock police officer Nicholas Rainier. It killed him that day. In the middle, it killed Lubbock Lieutenant Paramedic Eric Keel. And then also that same vehicle struck the gentleman on the left, Lubbock firefighter paramedic Matt Dawson. He survived that day. He had broken bones all across his body. I believe he had collapsed lungs, but his overriding injury was his traumatic brain injury. And he was on a horribly long road to recovery from that traumatic brain injury when he passed away, unfortunately, in the fall of this past year. And so it's really unfortunate they're considering that a line of duty death. But doctors and the human body know how to heal bones. That those can heal with time. What can't heal so well is injuries to the brain, and the human body or doctors don't really know how to heal that so well. And that was Matt's definitely, number one injury. Both Eric and Matt had structural firefighting helmets on that day, but when they got hit by that vehicle, the force of that vehicle knocked their helmets off, so didn't provide them any protection. And so after that day, in the months after that, I said, I want to be part of change, and that's what I did. And so on the next slide, I want to talk about who this standard applies to. And so this standard applies to the fire service, emergency medical services, law enforcement, roadway construction and maintenance crews, towing and recovery, state and federal Department of Transportation, or another way we could say it is it applies to everybody that either wears or should be wearing a high visibility vest. All of these disciplines need the most important organ in their body, their brain, protected when they're working out on the roadway, and that's what this standard looks to address. On the next slide, these are the two most common helmets that were historically worn on the roadway. Firemen typically wear their firefighting helmet, and other crews wear a hard hat, or many crews wear no helmet at all. And I think that needs to change. If you think about any sporting event or any industry that exists where there's a hazard to the head's protected by a helmet and then a standard that backs that helmet up. And we didn't have that before this ASTM standard, and that's why I'm so excited about it. On the next slide, this crash dummy is highlighting that a strike to the side of the head would be more likely when working out on the roadway. On the next slide, I have a cutaway of a firefighting helmet there. And so a firefighting helmet and a hard hat are very similar. They both have a webbing suspension system in it, and those webbing suspension systems provide really good top-down impact protection, but they don't really provide side or lateral impact protection. They're not good at that at all. With simple thumb pressure, I can push that firefighting helmet or a hard hat and push that helmet up against the head. And so I would say anything that has a webbing suspension system in it is not ideal to wear on the roadway. What's needed is a helmet like my daughter's wearing on the right there. That's actually a cutaway of a motorcycle helmet that I had access to, but it has foam on the inside, and I think foam is what we need to protect the most important organ in our body. And it's foam like motorcycle helmets have, car or NASCAR helmets, bicycle helmets, snow sports helmet. The list goes on and on, but foam is, I believe, what we need. On the next slide, so it's not just getting hit by a vehicle that poses a danger. In that picture on the left, that was a lug nut that got kicked up and impaled into a windshield. On the right, that's a big guardrail bolt that got kicked up off the roadway by a passing snowplow and kind of up above and to the right of that guardrail bolt, you can see the dent in that firefighting helmet. If you've never held a firefighting helmet before, they're extremely rigid and durable. And so either one of those strikes would have been near fatal or fatal. And so definitely want head protection to under protect us from stuff like that. The next slide. That's some crews there from the Lubbock Fire Department and our EMS agency in Lubbock, University Medical Center EMS, wearing the helmets that we adopted in the interim after that horrible accident that I talked about. And so as of right now, there's actually not a helmet on the market that meets the new ASTM standard. It was only published a couple months ago. And so that's kind of our stopgap helmet that we're wearing until we get an ASTM roadway helmet on the market. Talk about the more specifics of the standard. It addresses impact protection, external projections, positional stability, retention system strength, horizontal field of view, face and eye protection, and then chin protection if it's included on the helmet. And then it also has 3 optional tests, and that's heat resistance, electrical hazard resistance, and visibility, or how visible the helmet is in low light and daylight, nighttime conditions. On the next slide, these are some organizations, and all of these, except the center one there, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, were prior to my work. But on the right, Virginia Department of Transportation bought safety helmets, or in this case, I'm calling them roadway helmets, for all their personnel, and that's what they're wearing now. And in the top left, North Carolina, I'm not exactly sure on the status. There's some YouTube videos out there talking about where they bought them. And so I don't know if they've got those deployed yet, but it's definitely something that they're talking about. And then the bottom left was from Georgia's Safety Service Patrols. They've adopted roadway helmets a number of years ago. On the next slide, these are just some of the first responder agencies that have adopted roadway helmets. I'm not going to name them all there, but all those organizations have adopted roadway helmets for all their personnel. And so what we need now is we need a helmet manufacturer to produce a ASTM standard, and then we need adoption of that standard. On the first slide, my email's on there. I'd be happy to answer any questions for anybody out there that has a request for any more information. And with that, I will turn it back over to the moderators for the question and answer session.
Thanks very much, Brady, and thanks to all our presenters. A lot of great information. We have, my name is Doug Trout. I'm with the NIOSH Construction Safety and Health Office, and we have a few minutes for questions. And we have received some questions prior to our webinar, and we're going to run through some of those. The first one is a overarching question, and which I think is really important. I think most of us, probably most of the attendees, are familiar with the hierarchy of controls. The hierarchy of controls is a method or system for ranking controls or interventions or safeguards in the workplace from most to least effective. And so occupational safety and health is a foundation of occupational safety and health is our hierarchy of controls. And so, Rosa, I'm wondering if you can touch on the hierarchy of controls as it relates to preventing head injuries, traumatic brain injury, and where do helmets or hard hats fit into the hierarchy of controls?
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug. So selecting head protection and using this type of PPE is essential in construction. But it's not enough to ensure protection of workers from head injuries. And we really need to be thinking about and focusing on the hierarchy of controls in relation to this. In the hierarchy of controls, PPE is the least effective level in the designations of the hierarchy. And elimination and substitution and engineering controls are more effective because they control exposure without that significant human interaction. So, for example, for our industry, to prevent head injuries from dropped or falling objects, it's best to also implement controls that prevent objects from falling to a lower level in the first place, like guardrails and debris nets and screens and tool tethers. And so we encourage folks to please use CPWR's pre-task planning resources to ensure that you are using controls that are higher in the hierarchy than PPE. And pre-task planning is a process performed before each task starts to discuss the steps of the work and the hazards and the available controls. And it might be known as a job hazard analysis or a job safety analysis or morning huddle. And CPWR has created a comprehensive PTP package with applied tools like checklists and templates and practical examples to help you through the process. And then another resource that's relevant to this that we did not discuss in the presentation is that we also have a planning program to prevent struck-by incidents that is devoted to improving pre-job and pre-task planning specifically to prevent struck-by incidents related to falling, flying, swinging, and rolling objects. And that program was developed with input from the NORA Construction Sector Council struck-by work group. And we are actually currently wrapping up a pilot test to identify any necessary improvements, but it is available on CPWR's page.
Great. Thank you very much, Rosa. So Srinivas, next question is for you. You provided a great explanation of the fact that traumatic brain injury can be mild, moderate, and severe. And we had a question in the question and answer box about the symptoms of traumatic brain injury, and we tried to provide some information so there is some information in the Q&A box about symptoms, and particularly we focused on mild traumatic brain injury because probably most likely that those are going to be the hardest to detect. And so the question that we're wondering about is the epidemiologic data to assess traumatic brain injury. What are some of the limitations of the epidemiologic data, and particularly maybe related to the question that we had related to mild traumatic brain injury, which can be difficult, maybe non-specific, but also to brain injuries that may have delayed effects.
Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, mild TBIs they are the delayed effects where they have subtle symptoms or no symptoms. They show up late compared to severe or moderate TBIs. They require immediate care, right? So one of the data sources we can look for is from the worker compensation claims. So where you have date of injury and then first visit and then follow-up visit and then rehabilitation care, other care, long-term care. So until the that claim is closed, you can follow up how the worker is doing. And as in the chat box, he mentioned what are the symptoms. The main thing for employers to be aware of those symptoms, right? When you're had a struck by an injury, or if you had a falls, but you didn't have any major injury, but you might have delayed effects such as headache, loss of memory and confusion, and vomiting and nausea. So you have to be aware of those symptoms, and you have to seek medical care as soon as you have an injury. Then only you will be recorded, and we get to know the full picture of these mild TBIs.
Great, thanks, Srinivas. And just to summarize a couple points there, I think the answer is that mild TBI in particular can be difficult. And so anyone with a head injury or possibly a head injury should have a high index of suspicion, even with mild symptoms, because we know traumatic brain injury can be so severe in long-term effects. So have a high index of suspicion, even if the symptoms appear mild at first. And the second point I'd like to just echo is that Srinivas summarized some of the available sources of data that helped him compile his statistics. But NIOSH also and others across the country are using workers' compensation data more and more to help with assessing some of these occupational health impacts. So that is a growing area in occupational data collection and surveillance. I just wanted to point that out. NIOSH has a Center for Workers' Compensation Studies that is involved with that work. Great. So another question, Diana, I think I'm going to go to you. How does ISEA or how do helmet manufacturers determine helmet or hard hat expiration dates?
Well, that is a really good question, and it is a question we get very often. And I hate using this term, but it depends. Each manufacturer has their own kind of service life or recommendation that they have for their product. So there isn't a general blanket statement out there. However, the kind of like the general recommendation is, if you're looking at probably 5 years if there are no incidents. And that's something that we do have several manufacturers that say 5 years if there are no incidents. Now, mind you, that service life is defined at the date the helmet was put into use, not the date of manufacturer. So, if you've got a helmet that's sitting on a shelf and it hasn't been used, it's in original packaging, they're not looking at that date. They're looking at, when you're actually putting it into use. So, however, if the user, environments are more extreme, like there's exposure to like high temperatures from, sunlight or to chemicals, you're probably going to want to take a look at replacing those a lot sooner. But it, like I said, it depends. But one of the most, couple important things to consider is that if a head protection has been in an incident, or if there's been a forcible blow of any magnitude, that it should be replaced immediately, even though there is no damage visible. There could be structure, within it that could have been damaged that might not be visible to the wearer. So those should be replaced immediately. And then additionally, head protection needs to be inspected regularly. And this is something that we don't have in the standard. And we're looking at putting together a user guide and a user and maintenance guide for head protection. And, just before you put it on, make sure that you're just looking at the shell for any cracks, check the liner for any rips or, degradation there, examine the headband, just to make sure that, everything is working together. If there's one thing that might be off, it could affect the performance of the entire head protector. So if you're thinking that, oh, that's just a small little crack in the foam, but remember that foam is there, and it's working with the shell and it's working with the, with the other protective devices that are in there. So just inspect it regularly. If you've got a head protector that you think is past its usable life, I highly recommend that you bring that up to your manager and get a new one.
Great advice. Thank you, Diana. Another question, going back to you, Rosa. Can you give us a summary of when hard hats and safety helmets should be used? Are they to be used just for workers working at heights, or are there other? I think you touched on some of this in your presentation, but what are the other indications, or what are the other reasons for construction workers to be wearing head protection?
Thanks, Doug. So I would recommend for folks to please consult our resource, our guide to selecting head protection that outlines the primary factors we recommend considering when selecting head protection. And so we recommend engaging in that thorough job hazard analysis to evaluate what's most appropriate for your job site. And that would include looking at what general tasks you're performing. Slips, trips, and falls can happen at the same level, and head protection is essential protection for slips, trips, and falls. So we recommend engaging in that job hazard analysis process. And in our resource, we also include information about factors related to the work environment, to equipment needs, and personal factors in more depth to consider when evaluating selection. And You can find more information about all of that in our resource.
Great. I think that resource is an outstanding thing for everyone to look at. So please, everyone, please go to the link and look at that online and download it if you can. Another question back to you, Diana. Over the last couple of years, the different standard, you covered some of this in your talk, but I think it's great to go over again. Over the past couple of years, different standards have been discussed in detail and sometimes in not enough detail. But tell us, the European standards are not officially recognized in the US, but do they matter for personal protective equipment, including headgear in the United States? Or tell us more about the European standard.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that question, because that is, you know, a lot of these ones that were asked for this webinar were all, you know, ones that we get all the time. And as I mentioned, the standard in the United States that is regulated by OSHA is the ANSI ISEA Z89.1 standard. And that is the requirement for head protection in the US, and the EN standard, as I mentioned, is a mountaineering standard. So it is something that's not required here in the United States. You know, we're not you know telling anybody no, they can't use it, but you need to make sure that the product first meets the ANSI ISEA Z89.1 standard. And then anything additional above and beyond that is, you know, is purely up to the user.
Great. Thank you, Diana. And Brady, we haven't forgot about you. Thanks again for your presentation. But we had a question in the question and answer about bump caps. So are you okay telling us what's the difference between a bump cap and the helmets that we're talking about? And when do you think bump caps may be used, or when should they be used? Or tell us more about bump caps.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've seen the word bump cap used to describe many different helmets or head protection, but probably the most classic one is it looks just like this cap that I'm wearing, but it's made out of hard plastic material, and so they provide very basic protection. And some, or I would say maybe even most, don't even have an impact management system like foam or a webbing suspension system on the inside. And so they're primarily designed just to protect against slight abrasions and, you know, other bumps. You know, maybe you're squatting down and stand up, you know, and you bang your head, and it's better to have that bump cap than nothing. But, you know, what I would say in, you know, other arenas is, it's always best to be wearing a helmet that meets a standard, you know, so if it's on the roadway, the standard that I talked about, you know, or if it's in, you know, the construction industry, the helmet standard, the ANSI Z89 standard. And so ideally you'd be wearing a helmet that meets the standard where the hazard is addressed by. So.
Great. Thank you, Brady. And back to you, Diana. Tell us a little bit about chin straps. What are the requirements for chin straps with helmets and hard hats and head protection for construction workers?
Yeah, so the chin straps are an option within the Z89.1 standard currently. So there is an option for the type 2 style head protection, whether it's a hard hat or a safety helmet style. There is an option that manufacturers can add a chin strap to the head protection. So it is something that it's not new. It's been in there for, you know, several revisions. And I think because it's an optional, it's not a requirement to have a chin strap. You know, it is something that is in the standard and can be you know, tested for performance as well.
So is there would a safety helmet be considered in compliance if the chin strap is removed? If a helmet had a chin strap and it was removed, would it be considered in compliance?
If it meets the Z89.1 type 2 requirement, yeah, and the chin strap was removed, it would still be in compliance. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, Brady. Why do some of the new safety helmets not have brims?
So I'll answer that by talking about like a motorcycle helmet to start with. If you think about a motorcycle helmet, the shell of them is smooth and spherical, and it's that way for a reason. If you've ever seen a motorcycle helmet with like an off-road motorcycle helmet with a large sun visor sticking out the front, those, if they impact to get something, they easily break away. And things sticking out from a helmet are called projections, in this case external, meaning on the outside of the helmet. So if you think about getting hit on the side of the head and something sticking out, let's switch to brims now, or anything, it really acts like a lever, and it can thereby increase the injuries that would otherwise happen, or the forces, or it can simply force the helmet off the head. Brim sticking out, our fire helmets have those really big brims. And so, maybe only for a top-down impact, a brim would be okay because it wouldn't be affected. But I would say anytime there's a hazard of getting hit on the side of the head, we want the helmet to have, in essence, the same profile as our skull, and not anything sticking out. And if something is sticking out, that it easily breaks away. Our ASTM roadway helmet standard has specifications for external projections, meaning we don't want them sticking out. They have to be a minimal, how much they stick out, or they easily break away.
Okay, thank you, Brady. And a question back to you, Diana. Can you tell us? This can be complex, but give us some examples of how to think about head protection and affordability. What are you able to comment on the cost comparisons between traditional hard hats and maybe newer safety helmets? And how is it how does ISEA think about the cost of these pieces of equipment?
So, I understand we do hear a lot that the cost is a big factor, right? The traditional style old hard hats were, super inexpensive. And now that we're, bringing these new features and functionality to these safety helmet style, these different styles, the cost does go up, and, understandably so, right? But what you need to take a look at is what job are you doing? What are the hazards in your job, right? Or in the work area. So do you need to have a full on, helmet with chin strap and all of that? Does it need to have, or is it just something you're working, you're working on the ground and you're just worried about things just dropping from from up high and impacting the top of your head? So really, you need to take a look at your application, and based on what in Rose's presentation, she talked about doing a job hazard analysis, and that should be the first thing that you do. Take a look at the hazards, and that will help you determine which is the appropriate head protector for your application. And from there, that's when you can then consider cost, because then you're going to look there. That's going to vary by manufacturer as well.
Great, thank you very much, Diana. And we have some more questions in the Q&A box. We don't have a representative of the ASTM or ANSI direct committees here. But maybe Diana, do you have a thought on the relationship between ASTM and ANSI? Is that something you feel comfortable commenting on?
I'm on mute. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so ASTM is another standard development organization, just like ISEA. We develop standards, and ANSI is the approval body. I know for ISEA, our procedures for developing standards are based on the ANSI essential requirements. So we're accredited by ANSI. So ANSI doesn't write the standards. They just ensure that the process, the consensus process is followed in the development of a standard.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that helped answer the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, just one thing on that. That question might have been related. Hey, could these two helmets be, or could a helmet meet both standards? That way, they don't have to potentially have two helmets. If they work on the roadway some of the time, and then maybe in an industrial setting or wherever that other construction job is off the roadway. And I would say maybe. But if you think about all the standards exist, I mean, there's a ton of standards, and those standards are specific to the hazard. And so, a motorcycle helmet also isn't good as a skateboarding helmet per se, or vice versa. But I would say they could be possibly merged, the two helmets. But when this ASTM roadway helmet makes it to market, and then they send it off to be tested to see if it'll meet ANSI Z89, unless the manufacturer specifically, made additional changes to make that happen, it probably wouldn't meet both. And so.
Yeah, great, Brody. Brady, so you answered one of the other questions in the quick Q&A box. So basically, Brady was talking about the roadway ASTM update, and that's separate from the Z89 process that Diana was referring to. So they're
Oh, got you.
Yeah, so they're separate. So there was a question about how does the ASTM update we summarized in the presentation affect the ANSI Z89, and they're really separate processes for different hazards in different workplaces.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, thank you. We had a question about concussion, and the simplest way to describe concussion is that it really represents a mild traumatic brain injury. And so there's a continuum of traumatic brain injuries, and most standard definitions of concussion refer to concussion as a mild traumatic brain injury. And so all these topics that we're talking about in preventing traumatic brain injury apply to concussion. So hopefully that helps address that question. I think this question next, we have a couple more minutes, Diana. There's a question about the marking requirements in the Z89 revision. Will that apply to both type 1 and type 2 head protectors? Is that something you can address?
Yes. Yeah. I was looking for the question in the chat to make sure I'm answering it correctly. So the plus marking requirements, yes, that'll be an option for both type 1 and type 2. So you can still have a type 1 style head protector, safety helmet, hard hat, without the chin strap requirement. But if you do have a chin strap on there with the additional roll-off testing and the additional penetration criteria, then if that product meets that additional safety features, then it would be marked with a plus. So it would be a type 1 plus. And the same would go for the type 2 head protector. It would be a type 2 plus with the plus marking. So that plus marking identifies that product has additional safety features.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Brady, I think question maybe you can handle, or at least refer on the questioner. Where can more information be found on types of helmets used by fire departments or perhaps emergency response personnel? Where would you recommend people go to find out what types of helmets, the requirements for those helmets?
Yeah, I think the best resource would be an organization called Emergency Responder Safety Institute. Their whole mission is everything roadway safety, and they have a specific page on head protection. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a module on head protection for emergency responders. There's updated information about the ASTM standard. And so that's kind of the go-to source for anything. But feel free to reach out to me also if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Brady. So Rosa, I'm going to answer a question and then go to you for clarification. So there's a question about whether head protection should be required for workers in equipment storage yards. Now, I know that may or may not be specifically construction, but I think it's applicable. And so I think the short answer to that is that it's the management's employer's responsibility to determine if there's a hazard for the workers. And the document that Rosa explained and is available at the link in the chat is focused on construction workers, but it provides a great explanation of performing a hazard analysis. And so I think the answer to this question about requiring headgear for workers in equipment storage yards, the short answer is do a hazard analysis and determine if there's a risk for head injury. And Rose, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Doug. I do not have anything major to add to that answer. I would recommend consulting our pre-test planning resources. They are designed for construction, but can be used in other sectors. And there's a lot of flexibility in the resources themselves and ability to tailor based on your specific work and job site.
Right. And another question also gets to this really important concept of understanding what the hazards are in your workplace. Is there a best practice sheet for identifying types of exposures? And that's really, I think there certainly are summaries available for industries, but it really can be a job, workplace by workplace or a job by job assessment to see if there's a hazard for the workers. Then all the information that's available in the CPWR summary sheet can be applicable, whether they're construction workers or perhaps not construction workers. But it's the hazard analysis and determining if there's a head injury potential is key.
Doug, is it okay if I jump in to add something there?
Yes, absolutely.
This resource is not tailored for head injuries specifically, but I think it could be possibly applicable to this question about best practices, a best practice sheet for identifying exposures. CPWR has created a compendium of work-related task lists by construction occupation, which is a resource that is based on the Occupational Informational Network, or ONET, that classifies and lists tasks by trade. So I can put a link to that in the chat, but we have that in English and Spanish for, I believe, 26 different trades that lists out tasks by trade, and that could be a resource to use for this.
Great, thank you, Rosa. Back to Brady. So there's a question about ASTM partnering with manufacturers. How far has the process gone, Brady? Have there been has there partnering with specific manufacturers? Not that you need to name any manufacturers at this point, but are manufacturers partnering with ASTM on the process you described?
Yeah, so this was my first interaction with ASTM, and I just served as a volunteer on that work group. But as far as I know, they don't specifically partner with manufacturers. They produce standards, and then those standards exist, and manufacturers can develop a helmet to those standards and then send their helmet in to get it verified or /certified to meet that standard, and then get the label put on it. But manufacturers were involved in the process of creating the standard. So at the very inception, we had multiple manufacturers involved, and they worked all throughout, and there were definitely great partners throughout the creation of that standard. But we just don't have definitive word yet that any one particular manufacturer is definitely creating this helmet or it's in the works. I just don't know that. I haven't got a green light by any helmet manufacturer yet, but I hope to soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Brady. I think we've run out of time. Great questions. Thank you to all our panelists and Jess Bunting and CPWR for putting this on. And Brad, if you have a final closing word, I'll send it back to you.
There we go. Trying to find those buttons. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As we mentioned, this has been recorded, and there's a lot of resources that are available in the links. You can contact Jessica at CPWR. And just as a final reminder, for your best trick or treat, on October 31st, we'll be having part 2 of this series, the selection and practical use of head protection in the construction industry. That'll be moderated by my partner and co-chair of the NIOSH-NORA Construction Sector Work Group on struck by injuries, And that'll be Alana Klein will be monitoring that. So come back and we'll continue our discussion on head protection from struck by injuries. Thank you so much. And thanks to CPWR for hosting this and NIOSH for sponsoring it.